Good evening. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. My name is Todd McIntyre, Community Relations Manager for Caltrain, and I also have with me Raphael Bolin, who is the Project Manager, standing at the ready in case we have any computer issues there. We're going to tag team. He's the Project Manager on the San Bruno Grade Separation Project, and he will take you through the project phasing, as well as some renderings and different finish treatments that we've been looking at and stuff that we've been working on with the city and through CAC suggestions after I give the overview. So again, thank you. All right. So let's see. We're good. All right, so to begin, we just wanted to just talk a little bit about the goals of the San Bruno Grade Separation Project. Key to the project are safety for both motorists and pedestrians, as well as reducing congestion here at San Bruno Avenue with the 90 trains per day that we run in service on Caltrain. We also, through this project, believe this is catalytic and helpful to the downtown redevelopment proposals and interests of the city of San Bruno as well. So to talk a little bit about the different crossings, so we have 3 vehicular crossings, and I apologize, it's a little bit big. I couldn't reduce it for the screen size here enough, but I'll go through it. The vehicular crossings that are going to be constructed through this project are at Angus, San Mateo, and San Bruno Avenues. And then we will have pedestrian-only crossings that will be constructed at the new station, as well as at Sylvan and Euclid Avenues. There will be pedestrian access, obviously, at the automobile crossings as well. Okay. A couple of the questions that have come up have to do with right-of-way concerns. We do want to emphasize that this project is within our right-of-way. There are just a couple slivers of property that we had to work with the owners on. Part of it is at the Toyota dealership. I believe it's 160 square feet. We also are going to have to relocate, but we will put back, once the project is complete, parking spaces at Artichoke Joe's. There will additionally be some temporary construction impacts and easements required that may require things like local traffic only or one-way traffic only on First Ave for a couple periods of time. To go through the project schedule here for a moment, we've got what's going to begin first, which is what's called a box culvert and utility relocation that will precede the construction of the main grade separation project. That construction will begin in May of this year, hoping to finalize that award and notice to proceed on that project shortly. That will go through October. While that project is in construction, we are actually in the bid phase of the full grade separation project, and hope to award, and actually need to award that by July for the funding requirements with the state. Once that is awarded, then we will have a approximately 60-day or so period where we give what's called a limited notice to proceed to our contractors to give us submittals and all those different things, and then we determine what the scheduling of that project will be. And then that project will start about October of this year as the box culvert is wrapping up. We have been in discussions with the city, and they have asked us to come back again in the September timeframe after the summer vacations and after Labor Day when school's back in, to meet with you all again and sort of give you a more firm schedule of how that construction period will progress. Okay. But here's the projected schedule. So again, that award is in July. The first thing to be constructed is what's called a shoe fly. And Raphael will come up and go through sort of the project phasing briefly a little bit later to tell you what all these different phases are. But it's essentially constructing tracks adjacent to the current tracks, which will allow us to shift the trains and then build the grade separation where the tracks currently are. Then during the process, that will go through about March of 2011. During fall 2010 and spring of 2011, we expect that there may be a couple of street closures during that time. Those should be the only ones, however, and you will get adequate notice prior to that happening. And then the full grade separation construction begins about March of 2011 and will go through June of 2012. And here's Raphael.
Okay, thanks. My name is Raphael Boland. I'm the project manager for this grade separation project. And I'm going to go through the staging very quickly. And essentially what I'm showing is, as you can see, this is San Bruno Avenue running up this way on the screen. San Mateo is shown in its final configuration off to the side. And so 380 would be off to the lower left-hand side of the screen as you're looking at it. And the existing Caltrain station would be up on the top right. For those of you who want to kind of look at it a little bit better, I think the model will probably explain a little bit better the whole lay of the project. But effectively, I'm focusing on San Mateo, San Bruno, because that's where most of the traffic issues are. And so traffic, of course, was one of a few issues that we had to cover in this project. One of the others was BART, as you know, runs right along, adjacent, and at one point underneath our track. So that was a major design issue. And then the other two issues we had to deal with were, number one, how do we build this project, stage it such that we can minimize impacts to our rail operations? And number two, how do we build it where we minimize, to the extent possible, impacts to the community, to road operations, and to pedestrians? So those were kind of the things, and you'll see as we go through some of the innovative methods that we utilize to try to optimize that. Bicycles too. Thank you. So this is very similar to what you see there today. As you know, San Mateo was realigned as part of the interim work back in 2008. So you can see San Mateo already making a 90, if you will, and First Avenue flowing on to San Mateo. And you see our tracks running as they are today. So this is the shoe fly that Todd alluded to. And what a shoe fly is nothing more than a temporary bypass for rail. So essentially what's going to happen, before this slide popped up, what you're not seeing is off the screen, if you will, there's going to be some track work going on to the north, and there's going to be a temporary station constructed immediately to the south of the existing Caltrain station. So what that allows us to do is ultimately shift our train traffic from the existing main lines, where it's shown in this slide, onto these temporary shoe fly tracks. And what you're seeing is, of course, you can see the shoe fly runs everywhere except at the crossings. And that's by way of illustrating the fact that, of course, as we're constructing this, we're still going to be running cars up each one of these three crossings. So we have to be a little bit innovative in the way we stage this to minimize delays. So what's going to happen during this time frame is that all three crossings will remain open. There will be periods where there will be temporary detours. Okay, so San Mateo, and you'll see in later slides, ultimately will get moved immediately to the south of its current alignment. So what that allows us to do is essentially build San Mateo right next to the existing San Mateo. And when we're working on existing San Mateo, we'll run traffic on new San Mateo and vice versa. The same thing will happen at Angus. Angus, those of you who know the street or came up here today probably, you'll notice there's a little jog as you hit First Ave. We're going to correct that and connect the dots, if you will, on Angus. So same thing on Angus. When we're working on existing Angus, we'll allow you to drive on proposed Angus and vice versa. San Bruno will be a little bit trickier because San Bruno is not going anywhere. So the bypass will sort of be literally a temporary alignment where we move vehicles to the outside and then to the inside, depending on what we're working on. So in the next phase, you can see the shoe fly is complete, and now the train is running on the shoe fly. Now, in order to accomplish this one relatively minor looking change on the slide, we're actually going to have to cross over and actually cut over all three crossings simultaneously. So it's actually one of the trickiest operations in the entire construction. So that's kind of why I stopped on this slide. So essentially what's going to happen is, for this week, and there'll be notification going on well in advance of this, there will be some closures associated with this, okay? The priority is to get San Bruno open as quickly as possible. So closures will begin Friday night after our last train run. So that's typically 11:30, midnight, something like that. And then we're going to close San Bruno, San Mateo, and Angus. We will then open San Bruno to emergency traffic by the next morning. And by that afternoon, we'll have San Bruno open to regular vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Yes, sir.
You just said you're going to close Friday night at 11 o'clock?
Yes.
So what about from 11 to 5 a.m.? Is that when construction's going to go on?
Correct.
So what about, I mean, I already went through BART. I know you probably heard this already. I went through the BART coverage that went on here.
Sure.
And you know what? We lost some tenants because I have a building on Huntington.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when tenants move out because of the noise and what have you? And what does that do to all the people on First Avenue and Huntington Avenue that are living there? What, I mean, from 11 to 5 a.m. when we don't sleep. So how are we going to be compensated for that?
Maybe I wasn't clear, but that's one night from 11 to 5 a.m.
Just one night?
Correct.
So what are you going to do that one night? So we're going to be inconvenienced that one night, regardless of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so we just got to bear with it then is what you're telling me.
Well, no, we certainly take every effort to mitigate the effects. Our specs are written to essentially minimize noise, minimize construction impacts. I'm not saying there are not going to be any impacts. Yes, there will be impacts that night. I mean, you can't have construction.
Can I just say something? There is children and there is, you know, kids that go to school and what have you. I know you're trying to do it on the weekends, but supposedly our weekend's for rest, so we're going to be up in the middle of the night waiting for this, you know, while we're supposed to be resting. So I hate to be negative about it, but I already went through this once, and you know, it's kind of a pain in the rear when the construction's going on.
I'll just address a little bit. Todd McIntyre, Community Relations. During all of our construction activities throughout the rail line, as well as our maintenance activities that have to take place, a lot of it does take place during late night hours outside of when the trains are running. What we do, like Raphael said, we put specs in our bid packages to minimize that noise as much as possible. We also do notify the community, and I'll go through our noticing procedures a little bit later in the presentation as well. And we do have contact information for when those disturbances do happen. And if we just go through kind of the rest of the presentation, it shouldn't take too much longer, and then we'll get to a question and answer period. No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, so at this point, the next priority is to open up San Mateo. So the next day, San Mateo is open, and that leaves Angus. Angus will be the most impacted crossing, and again, this is a one-time occurrence that is necessary for us to effectuate the change from our trains running on our current main line to this shoe-fly bypass. And Angus will be closed for up to 6 days during that period. And I understand that is an inconvenience, but that's the quickest we could make it happen. So once we are running trains on the shoe-fly, that allows us to take out our existing mainline tracks and allows us to begin constructing our elevated structure. Okay, so what's the elevated structure going to look like? For those of you who've been to San Carlos or Belmont, functionally it looks somewhat similar from the outside in terms of the finish. We've been working with the city to come up with some aesthetically pleasing architectural treatments, some planting, and we can go through all that later on to kind of make it fit in with the community. But the other thing that I wanted to focus on in this slide is I spoke very quickly about BART running right along Huntington Avenue. And so one of the things that we've had to do as part of this project to essentially construct adjacent to, and like I said, at one location above BART, is that rather than using soil, which is what you typically have in this kind of construction, we're using an ultra lightweight cellular concrete. And what this stuff looks like, it's essentially a foam. It's half the weight of water. It's poured rather than rolled and compacted. And it'll allow us to do it quicker, and it'll allow us to construct the entire thing within the boundaries of the MSE wall. So in a typical structure, you have people coming in, coming out, cranes. We're going to avoid all this kind of disruption on Huntington by actually operating inside the MSE wall. So what you're going to see is you're going to see construction within the boundaries of this grade separation. And as they go, they'll build it up. They'll drive on what they've poured 2 days previously. So I just wanted to point that out. And of course, the whole reason we're doing this is that we cannot add additional loading onto the BART structure. So in order to mitigate that, what we'll do is, prior to even going up, we're going to excavate down to a maximum depth of 8 feet. we'll remove normal weight soil, we'll replace it with this ultra lightweight material. The sum total of all the ultra lightweight soil that we put in equals the weight of the soil we took out. So no new load is going to be added to the bar structure. That's why we call it load balancing. That's the concept. So next slide shows the construction of bridge piers. So you can see the structures at San Bruno, San Mateo. Angus will also, of course, be happening at this time frame. Now you can see the girders getting flown in for the actual flyovers. And I should mention that in addition to being bridge structures, San Bruno and San Mateo, and you can of course see later on when I show you some renderings, but those will actually act as the new elevated station for this project. So this is sort of a slide where needs a little bit of explanation as well. So this is most of the station. Okay, what you're seeing missing is the northbound platform, and I'll explain in a sec why that is. So essentially, at this point, what you have is you have trains off the shoe fly. The trains are running right back on our grade-separated tracks, which means no more gates, no more bells, and free-flow traffic at all these intersections. What it does not mean is that the train will be stopping at this new station yet because we're missing a platform. So even in this stage, we're still going to ask passengers to load and disembark at the temporary station. So the reason I stopped at this slide is because the one other big coordination issue, which I'm sure everybody here has heard about, is high-speed rail. And it is, okay, you guys are doing this, you're grade separating. How does this fit in with high-speed rail? So the short answer with high-speed rail is we don't know what the timing of high-speed rail is. We think we know. We think we have a good idea. We're talking to the high-speed rail folks on a daily basis, and we know as much as they do at this point, but bottom line is we don't know. So what we did with this project is we designed it in such a way that essentially nothing in this project conflicts with high-speed rail. So we're not going to build something that'll have to be demolished if high-speed rail comes out. That's one of the first priorities. The other thing is we needed to stage it in such a way that high speed could come naturally right after. Because what we don't want to have to do is have high-speed rail coming back in this very room 2 years from now giving you the same speech. We want to stage it so that the impacts are minimized. And by doing it this way, now at this stage, everything's grade separated. Our tracks are over on this side, and that allows us to construct 2 more high-speed tracks on that side. So the one aspect of this project that could have been a conflict is this northbound platform. Because I would never build a 2-track station if high speed is right behind me. So this is what a 2-track station would look like. And this is essentially the concept if high speed 2 years from now is never going to go. And so what we would do is, rather than leave a half-finished station, is we'll come in as an option on this contract. We'll award the construction, if you will, finishing that structure. We'll finish out the northbound platform. We'll build the parking lot on this side, which will be our new transit center and drop-off area. And then we'll demo the temporary station, and we're done a 2-track separated grade structure. If high speed does come, there's a couple of different possibilities that could happen. One is we've currently designed 2 more tracks for high speed to come in immediately against us. So the staging happens pretty similar to before. The advantage is we've already done all the grade stepping. So none of this will impact the roads at this point. So essentially what we'll do is we'll bury that middle wall and we'll build a 3rd wall on the outside, and we'll build up another 2 tracks worth of width. Okay? Now what you're seeing right now is you're seeing everything but the tracks, and that's deliberate, and that's because depending on where high speed is at that time, they may not be ready to build those tracks right away. There may be a month or so lag. If that happens, we'll keep running trains for a few more months out of the temp station, and then we'll allow them to finish their tracks. So the other possibility is, okay, what happens is now that 2 months turns into 6 months, turns into 8 months. So at that point, what we do is we'd finish our station, and what you'll have is a temporary period of time where you have essentially a very large boarding platform. It's not ideal, it's not our plan A, but if that does happen, that's what we'll do. We'll finish out the platform, if you will. That'll be a temporary structure. It'll allow people to board at the brand new station, and then we'll wait on high speed. And this is high speed, 4 tracks. So in a 4-track alignment, again, we're talking a high speed. Things are changing daily, as you know, but our best understanding at this time is that the configuration for San Bruno will be Caltrain will run on the outside and high speed will run in the middle. High speed will not be stopping at this time, that's my understanding, will not be stopping at San Bruno Station. So they're going to be going right through it. However, Caltrain will stop under normal operations. So I've got a couple of renderings that I'd like to show you, and I think really to kind of do these justice, you probably need to take a look at the model a little bit as well. But this is a shot from the extended Posey Park. So one of the things we're doing in this project is we are taking a small portion of Posey Park in order to realign some streets. In order to compensate for that, we're providing a larger Posey Park that feeds into this area here, which is kind of the entrance way to this. And what you're seeing here is a large architectural ramp with some planting, as well as we've come up with some architectural, what we call a water feature, which is essentially a fountain that cascades down. And this becomes more of kind of a plaza area with some benches and some other stuff that we worked with the city on. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. So this is a view from San Mateo Avenue at Posey Park looking north. And you can see the Chinese restaurant from across, and this is a little bit of the underpass. This is a view looking on First Avenue, and this kind of gives you a better idea of some of the things we were talking about. We'll show that a little bit further, but some of the ivy, some of the graffiti abatement planting that we're going to provide, and also some of the kind of a rock type treatment that we're going to do. And then the verticality, we worked with the city on breaking that up and providing some sort of interspaced bands, if you will, of a smoother finish to kind of make it look less monolithic and sort of kind of work with it. But you can see the sidewalk, and further down there is the station. You can see up in the center of the drawing. So here is a figure. This is from San Mateo. This is essentially across our transit center, our parking lot, if you will. And you can see there's a windscreen, which we've provided, and it kind of feeds into the pedestrian shelters. And those elevated structures that you see are actually elevator towers, so there'll be 2 elevator towers. And then you can see a number of the ramp features, et cetera. You're also seeing kind of a column type effect that we did, worked with the city to kind of produce this. So you'll see a similar treatment further down the line with the MSC wall itself. And this is, the next few slides are just a couple of shots of the platform itself under different configurations. You got to go back to those slides where we were showing 2-track, 4-track, you know, big platform, small platform. So this is a 2-track alignment. You can see Melody Toyota off in the back of the screen. And this is just another shot showing 2-track alignment. This one didn't come out very well, but if it did, you would see 4 tracks with a center fence. So really, I guess what you can see from this 4-track is that in the 4-track alignment, effectively the station looks the same. It just gets a little bit fatter in the middle, and then those 2 tracks become 3 tracks for high-speed rail. And some of the features that, and unfortunately this one's kind of cut off the side here, but luckily I know what it says. So these are some of the examples of some of the features that we worked with the city. So those of you who've been involved in this project from the beginning know there was a tremendous amount of public input that was garnered as part of this process. And continuing in that spirit, we worked very closely with the city to develop sort of, you know, just kind of enhanced features. And really that was the word the city always kept pushing on me, is that every time I would propose something, the city said, look, that's a regular Caltrain one. We want enhanced features. So just so you know, the city is really advocating for you guys on this, because we heard the message loud and clear. We went and put a lot of enhanced features for this project. So just some of the highlights. We were working with the city with some of the improvements that are going to be going around the downtown core to provide some sort of more pleasing architectural treatments, nicer looking chairs, garbage cans. There's an example of the finish. What you don't see on that MSC, of course, is some of the planting that will be there. Again, it's kind of off the screen, unfortunately, but there's a band of a clearer type of MSC, and that's meant to show that we're going to kind of mirror the sort of concrete to MSC kind of treatment. But you'll see a little bit more of a 3D effect. It'll look more like a stone than a cast monolithic concrete. And then some of the colors and textures you can see actually up on the board. Again, we work with the city very closely on the planting to you know, just work with species and things that have worked here in the area. And then the color rock that you see up there, it represents some of the color paving choices that were made for this new expanded plaza. So there's going to be some, you can't of course see on the detail on that model, but you're going to see some just architectural treatment, and it's sort of going to bring the plaza into focus a little bit better. So I'm going to ask Todd to come back and, or maybe I'll take questions. Since do you want to go through next steps and then we can take questions, or? All right. One more slide.
Just really quickly, thank you for your patience. Just wanted to highlight again that schedule, basically letting you know that May would be the start of the box culvert construction. And then, can you give me one moment, please? And then our contact information, which is in the packet there as well. We additionally have this presentation on our website. And the contact information is on the project fact sheet as well. So we have a phone number that's dedicated to our construction projects, and we have an email address that's dedicated to this specific project. And we do our best to have someone respond within 1 working day to whatever the questions or concerns are that are expressed to us. And there you go. So now we'll go ahead and take questions. Raphael? Take this one.
Okay, everybody hear me?
All right, and anyone who'd like to ask a question, would you please come up to the mic? The city of San Bruno is videotaping this and would like to be able to capture everybody on the microphone, please. So we can just come on up. There's a mic right here in the middle.
Oh, you want me to go over there?
Please. Thank you.
Okay. My question is, according to this, it's going to be a 2-year project?
Correct.
Okay. So the noise is going to be going on for 2 years, whether you're doing it at night, during the day, or we're going to have construction noise, correct?
Well, 2 years obviously will not be construction at one location continuously. I mean,
Okay.
there are different things that have to occur throughout those 2 years. I mean, is there a
'Cause
particular area you're interested in, or?
Yeah, I live on 2nd Avenue.
Okay.
So, and it's right next to the dealership there.
Right, Melody?
Right. So how long is that noise going to be? Because, you know, I mean, we just bought the house. I had no idea any of this was going on.
Right.
So how long are we going to expect to hear pounding and drills and, you know, if you're putting, and another question I have, if you can't answer that one, is what is the difference going to be for the noise from it being on the ground train that you hear now and above the ground train?
Okay, all right, those are both good questions, and I'll answer them in reverse order if that's okay with you. So we did a comprehensive noise and vibration study as part of our environmental clearance for this project, and that's exactly what we looked at, was before and after noise effects. And what we determined was that the noise actually is reduced as part of this project. Now that may sound counterintuitive, but the major thing that you're not going to hear, which is the biggest noise right now on this area, and I've worked quite a bit in this area, is no more train horns and no more bells.
Oh, so we won't hear the horns anymore.
Correct.
I like the bells.
They may do that for emergency purposes.
But I
from time
don't
to
like
time.
the horn sounds at all.
I don't think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Let me add just a caveat. So you won't hear horns at the crossings anymore.
Okay.
By federal regulations, however, as trains are entering in or passing through the stations and people are on the platform, they do have to sound the horns.
Some horns are different than other horns, and I don't know how they regulate these. Some horns, they start, it sounds like, in South City and lay on that horn all the way down. So I don't know, you know, what kind of regulations they have on who's blowing that horn.
The federal regulations state that the horns are required to be sounded a quarter mile ahead of a crossing, and when there are a series of crossings like that, you can essentially get that sound where it just sounds like a prolonged horn.
Okay.
And it also may depend that there's a train going in the opposite direction also blowing its horn. Sometimes ambient temperature, inversion layers, and everything can change the sound of the horns as well.
Okay, so the sound level is supposed to be
Right. So the first half of that is that no horns, or reduced horns, I should say. The second part of that is that same lightweight material that I spoke about has different vibration criteria than regular soil, so it'll actually dampen some of the louder rumbling that some people who live right next to the tracks might hear. You may not get that on Second, but those of you who live on First, I'm sure will be pleasantly surprised to see how much quieter that is. So that's the first half, is we did a comprehensive noise and vibration. After the job is done, less noise. The second half of your question is noise during construction.
Right.
And that's always a concern when you're doing something in an urban area. So what we've done is we've looked at every stage of this construction with an eye towards minimizing noise. So for instance, you talk about pounding. Typically the loudest pounding, if you will, comes from pile driving.
Right.
So one of the things we're going to do to mitigate that is we'll pre-drill. So we're not actually going to drive piles until we're already well below grade. So you're not going to hear that deafening pile driving that you sometimes get with construction. Some of the other things that we're doing, like I said, for instance, with this lightweight material, you're going to, it's literally a guy with a hose. And if you're used to concrete work, the first time you see the guy, you think he's the strongest guy on earth because he's lifting a 4-inch hose and pouring it. But again, it's half the weight of water. So you're not going to see the construction, the heavy rollers and the sheep's foot and all that. So a lot of those kinds of things we looked at and tried to mitigate. Now, back to what Todd said, is there is going to be effects, there's no question, and so our specifications are meant to handle that. And what we do with that is we provide maximum decibels they're allowed to have, and we work with the hours that we can. So I can't promise you there won't be any noise for 2 years, but what I can tell you is we've definitely done what we can to mitigate it, and it's not going to be 2 years of a guy with a jackhammer outside your front door doing that.
I have one more question, sorry. So when you were talking about closing San Bruno Avenue, okay, and it was just one night, that's fine. But how do we get out if everything else is blocked off? I mean, that's our access.
What's the detour while San Bruno? So you'd have to go up to Angus, to Scott Street, I'm sorry. You'd have to go up to Scott Street and over the tracks.
And over.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
And we were working very closely with emergency response to make sure that they're not having to detour. Correct.
And there will be a traffic mitigation plan during that time, and our noticing will be sent out to the community as well during that time. Okay. You next.
I have two questions. One is dealing
Would you mind just stating your first name?
My name is Doris Mays.
Where
and
do you live?
I was on the CAC.
Oh, great.
I'm also on the Traffic Safety Committee. I have two concerns. One is the school, how do you deal with the school children crossing the tracks all during the construction project? Because I remember that was one of the discussions we had. The other is, do you have a rendering of First Street or First Avenue when during the shoe fly operation, what that will look like? Because I think that's important to the people who live there. I don't live there, but I think that would be important.
I don't believe we have that rendering, do we?
I don't. No,
No.
I didn't.
I think it would be helpful if you did.
All we have is the rendering of what it would look like after
Finished.
post-construction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, can
But
you
the children, can you
do
speak to the
something
children?
like that?
I mean, I think in terms of the crossing of pedestrians and the children will all have to be part of our coordinated traffic mitigations and circulation planning as we're constructing the project, and that happens in coordination with the city.
Right. Do you want me to? I can.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
right now it's not.
Go ahead.
So really quickly on the pedestrian issue, we're well aware that our current Caltrain station is also used by a number of individuals, many of whom are children, to effectively cross from one side to the other. We're well aware of that. As Caltrain, we don't think that's ideal, but that is the situation, and so we have to respect that. So what we're doing is, and the model actually is probably the best way to look at it, but essentially, remember, we're going to construct a temporary platform immediately to the south of the existing platform. And what we're going to do on the very north side of that platform, so basically the closest point to the existing station, we're going to construct a similar at-grade crossing. We will serve that. And what we'll do is when we cut over from one station to our existing station to the new temp station, what we'll do is we'll consider that like any other cutover, which means one of those two has to be in service at all time. So it's literally not a matter of, well, when they get to it, they get to it. We have the contractor build everything ready to go, bag it, have it, K-railed off or what have you. the day they're willing to open the station is the day that has to be in service, because we are aware that's definitely an issue.
Okay, thank you.
You had a question, and you, sir. One second.
This is going to be the parking for the new station. So the new station is actually.
My name is Santha Takahashi. So could you talk a little bit about further south? We're off of Cupid's Row.
Okay.
And I think that's where the temporary station is going to be. Do you have any renderings of that?
actually
One.
on the very-
And two, it looks like the platform then goes ground level there.
Excuse us. Can you speak to the temporary station, Raphael, and
Yes.
how the grade slopes down?
What
at
it's
that
going to do
point?
to the noise level, because we already, our paintings in the house do this already with the thing flat.
Okay.
So I can't imagine now it's coming off a ramp, the trains are coming off a ramp, what it's going to do noise-wise and everything else.
Okay, so that's a good question. One thing I didn't mention when I stated earlier that we did a noise and vibration study, I should have been clearer that we looked at both conditions. We looked at the construction condition, and we took what we considered to be the worst case scenario, which was exactly what you said, which was the shoe fly. And we actually made even more conservative assumptions than that, because what we took is the worst construction case and assumed it would happen corridor wide, which obviously won't be the case. So we did look at both the future case, which, as I said, will be better than what it is now, and the construction case. And we did what we could to mitigate the effects of that. Your question was on grade, though, coming up? Or?
Well, right, so it's elevated all the way down to roughly Cupid's Row.
Correct.
On that map.
Correct.
We live right off of Cupid's Row, as
Correct.
do quite a number of other people.
Correct.
So what happens when that train goes downhill?
Oh, you're asking about the speed?
Yeah,
sort of.
I mean.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So actually, our slopes are not, they're train type slopes. We limit it to 1.25%. So to put that in perspective, the cross slope on a street is typically 2%. So you're looking at approximately half that cross slope. So when I say coming up and coming down, maybe I'm overselling the case. I mean, we limit it to a very gradual up and down. So you will, in fact, not hear this big braking noise or additional noise from the elevation. What you will have actually is a mitigative effect from the elevated structure because of the material it is and because you're not going to get this horn sound in that area.
I'm thinking vibration. is
Right,
where I'm
and
going
vibration was
with
the other
this.
half of what we looked at, and so the mitigation for that, like I said, the material actually has properties that effectively dampens it.
Okay.
So you'll actually have less vibration than you currently have, because I'm sure you've been on First Avenue. I know I have or even on that other side, and you feel it. There's no question you feel it. So it will be better when it's complete.
Okay.
Can I add something to that? You're talking about heights, and then you're talking about.
Take care.
It's similar to her question. So when the train's up at the, it's
Just, can we just let her?
oh, I'm sorry.
So I have a couple of questions or comments. One of the things is I know when they did the BART thing, there was a lot of dust that was going on. What are you going to do to mitigate that? And secondly, in your renderings, I didn't see anything as far as, handicap access and bicycle access on there. So those are my two questions.
Two very good questions. Okay, we, as you know, those are two things that we look at quite a bit at Caltrain. And so as far as handicap access, again, maybe the model is probably the better way of looking at it than at the renderings. So what you're going to see is we have actually exceeded the minimum number of ramps that were required. And we've got one large ramp here as we come into the park. We've got a ramp on this side, actually two ramps, one that comes from this side, one that comes off of First Avenue. And then we've got a ramp on this side and a ramp that you can barely see the end of on this side that comes here. We also have two elevators in the station, and we're also providing a pedestrian underpass in the station to allow individuals, if they're dropped off on this side, to cross over. So that's kind of on the ADA side. We actually kind of went to what was required, and then we went a couple
just
more.
wasn't clear on the.
No,
okay.
And I apologize. The renderings are difficult to work
Okay.
with. You kind of get what you get, is what I'm learning from the world of renderings. But to your second question is on bicycles. We kind of took the same approach. We instead of looking at just what's the minimum we have to do, we said, okay, this is what we have to do. Now let's take it up a step and look towards that, because as you know, obviously that's a major policy that we have at Caltrain, is trying to promote bicycles. So what we're going to do is bicycle access similar to what you saw with the ADA access, the difference, the only, not difference, but additional feature is you're going to have bike lockers located in 2 locations, 2 separate sets of bike lockers, and then 2 separate sets of bike parking. In addition, we're incorporating features like the rails, you probably know what it's called, I don't, that you can walk your bike up, things like that, to try to make it more bike friendly.
Okay.
And we're really looking forward to a lot of people biking to our station. So.
Right. And then the thing about the dust, because I know when they did the BART construction, there was a lot of dust.
Yeah,
what are you going to do?
And that's, dust is another one of those issues that we address primarily through 2 ways. One, by using these innovative measures to mitigate it. Like an example, again, back to the lightweight, you're not going to get the dust that you would out of a traditional earthwork job, because just that's the nature of the material. The other way we address it is, again, back to what Todd said, in the specifications, the section that covers noise is actually noise and dust palliatives. So it actually affects that, and we require them to abide by those specifications.
Thank you.
So specifically, what do you do to mitigate the dust? You're saying you're going
Can
by
we-
the specifications, but what are those?
Can we make sure to get you at the mic, ma'am? Because they're taping. Okay.
So I can answer that question. So essentially,
Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, the question was on dust management and dust palliatives. And so there's a number of techniques that you use. Primarily, you use use of dust palliatives, which is essentially a binder which, effectively what it does is it sticks to your very fine particles, which are the ones that tend to elevate and become dust. They make them heavier, thus they settle much, much quicker. It would be kind of the equivalent of spraying it with water, but it's a little bit more effective than doing that. So that's one thing that you can do for dust palliative. Kind of the bigger picture, though, really, is don't let the dust get formed in the first place. And that really goes back to what I was saying, is we looked at all these different construction, we looked at them one by one and said, okay, well, yeah, we need to do this. How can we do it, and what are the ways that we can get it done such that it's not producing the dust, not creating the noise, and not impacting the public? So does that answer your question, or?
Thank you. Sir?
Who's responsible for long-term maintenance and landscaping? And everybody puts sprinklers in, and they never turn them on. We don't want it to end up looking like in front of the BART station, all dead trees.
Well, we have worked with the city basically to determine specifications for drought-tolerant and native vegetation that would be planted. Also, we're in the process of negotiating what's called a construction management agreement. Management agreement, which will determine who is responsible between Caltrain and the city for maintenance of what parts of the project. Thank you. Next.
Hi.
Tilt the mic down for us, please. Thank you.
I want to know what kind of a plan for the noise control barrier plan. I have a few questions. Do you have a plan to hire the platform that's striking up into the air? And also I want to know about the vibration level creating.
Was that the height of the platform or the structure, how high it will be in the air?
I have a few questions.
Okay.
One was asking first, noise control barrier plan.
Noise control barrier plan. And then the vibration levels.
Right.
Okay.
And also, do you have a plan to hire the platform sticking up into the air?
To raise the platform, to move it up? Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
You want me to answer this? Okay.
The platform is sticking out in the air. Do you have a plan for hide that? To hide it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, to hide, to do different things. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Okay. So on the noise and the vibration, I'll probably just answer those two together. And some of what I'm about to say, other people have asked. But so we studied, we provided, as part of our environmental, we did a study on noise and vibration. And we looked at two conditions. We looked at the after condition, and we looked at during construction. So in the after condition, noise and vibration will be decreased from what they have now. So it actually is going to go down from what you currently have. The other thing that we look at is, of course, ways to minimize noise and vibration when we're doing the construction. And just actually on the last question, that's what I was saying is we look at that from two ways. We look at it from using techniques and using methodology that produces less noise and less vibration, and we do that on our planning side. And then on the other half, what we do is in our specifications that we give the contractor, we give the contractor requirements that say, this is the loudest you can be, you need to use mufflers, you need to use electric rather than diesel, a whole bunch of different techniques that we can use, but when you add them all up together, they produce a less noisy, less vibration effect. And then if the third question, I guess, had to do with ways that we're trying to kind of mitigate the
diminish
elevation.
the height.
And you couldn't quite see from some of our slides, but some of the things that we're doing with planting, we're going to put a number of trees, and you can see some of the samples there, but some of the ivy and some of the features like that will tend to cause it to blend in. Also by introducing some of the architectural elements that we talked about. So you'll have the treatment to make it sort of blend a little bit better. So I mean, and the other thing that we'll do, speaking of treatment, is on the bridges themselves. One of the city's big concerns was the city was interested in not having this sort of stark contrast between bridge and road, and so we worked with the city in developing some screening and some very nice lighting to sort of blend in and to really kind of make everything, minimize the impact, if you will, of a tall structure.
Earlier you mentioned about the 90 trains passing by per day. That much of a train transportation. Do we have, I live around that area. The noisy control, what kind of control to minimize the noisy for us living in that area?
Minimum noise?
What kind of controls, noisy control plan do you have?
Well, we currently run 90 trains per day right now. Right now we do. Okay, so what we've said is that the elevating the tracks above the grade crossings will allow us to not have to blow the horns at every crossing like is happening right now. Additionally, some of the vibrations from the trains will actually be diminished somewhat from what you currently have today. So it will be a less noisy situation.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
You have said that the project would not conflict with high-speed rail, but I can see one respect in which there could be a serious conflict. High-speed rail said its trains would not be compatible with a roller coaster effect along the peninsula. That is, changes in track elevation from one to another. But isn't exactly that what would occur in San Bruno? Because our grade SEP puts trains above cars. It's exactly the opposite in Millbrae and in South City. So what are you going to do to correct that roller coaster conflict?
Go ahead if you got it.
Okay, so I think the question was on the vertical grade, essentially trying to avoid this sort of up and down stagger. So as to our grades, as you know, we build our grades to a stricter requirement than what high speed's asking. We've presented to high speed, and they're going to be compatible with our approximately 1.2% grade. I guess the second question is, what happens in South City and what happens in Millbrae if they're going to go underground and we're going to go above?
Well, they are already exactly the opposite
Well,
of the San Bruno configuration.
Our understanding is that the alternatives analysis is supposed to come out in a little bit over a week, at which time they'll actually determine sort of what they're going to be proposing to do throughout the peninsula. We don't know what that is at this point in time. What we've tried to do is design a project that essentially protects the public funds that are in it, so that if high-speed rail does come on an elevated structure, we have designed it so that they can essentially just build onto what we have within our right-of-way, and we would not have to tear out what we spent basically $165 million to put in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I live on the 500 block of First Avenue, and my question is, during the construction, is there going to be like any fence or anything over there? Because right now there's no fence, and it drives me crazy. I wish you guys would put a fence up there. It's, you know, I got a little kid, and I know a bunch of the neighbors have little kids. So is there going to be a fence there? Or?
Go ahead.
Yes, we will be fencing the corridor along that side to prevent trespassing. One of the first orders of work will be to do that, yes.
Okay. And then what about after, when this is all complete, what's it going to be like on First Avenue?
So on First Avenue, depending how far, you said 500 block.
Yeah, it's pretty much this block right here where the train station is.
Okay, so at this location in particular, you're going to be very close to being at grade. So where the MSC, if you will, is, I mean, at this location, you're looking at a wall like that. There'll be fencing as well to prevent. When the MSC wall goes up above, I think it's 10 feet, that's when we say, okay, well, now the MSC wall is the fence.
And then what happens with the train station and the parking lot?
The existing train station?
Yeah.
Will get removed. It will be demolished.
Okay, is this going to be open space, I guess, or?
We're actually still working on what happens with that. And,
Okay.
and we're talking with the city and with other individuals to see, because we're going to have some extra area over there that Caltrain won't be using.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Can you give him the mic?
Mike Watkins, 573 Huntington. I'm just asking a question. Also, the elevation of the train over here at approximately 4 buildings from Angus down. Where are we coming at? Are we on an incline now, or decline, or?
No, you'll be pretty close to fully elevated.
Or pretty elevated. That's what I was asking. Now, the lady that was up there in the beginning, am I supposed to be up here? I'm sorry.
Either way.
Whatever. Anyway, my question is, when the train's traveling, so we got a 3-story building there, how's that going to impact, like, say, the 3rd floor, the train going by? That's what I think.
For noise?
For noise, yes.
Noise and vibration. Okay,
So that elevation I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the 1st floor, because I know what it feels like there. I'm talking about up on top now. You got a train coming across.
Understood. So a little bit of how they do these studies is they identify what they call sensitive receptors, which are essentially people or businesses. And of course, residences have a higher value, if you will, than a business, with the assumption that a business can put up with a certain amount of discontent, whereas an individual probably isn't willing to do that. So what they do is they identify all these sensitive receptors, and those could be 3 stories up, they could be ground level, and you run them all. And what you do is you plug them into your model, and you say, okay, if I'm going to run a train at this location, given these characteristics, what does that do to these noise receptors? So we did look at that when we looked at the noise and vibration study. Again, the final alignment will reduce noise and vibration at those sensitive receptors.
At that height?
At that height, correct.
So, okay. And then the other question I have is, I'm going back to driving piles. I was earlier screaming. But the buildings and the area shook pretty much.
Right.
Correct. And now you're saying they're going to do something new. They're going to drill first, and then they're going to drive pilings.
Correct.
I mean, you can only go so deep because you got BART below you, right?
No, actually, we have to go below BART in order to drive piles, because when we look at foundations, we look at basically zone of influence. So if you picture like a Christmas tree coming out, that every time I put a load, that load propagates through the earth. So the people at BART, believe me, are at least as squeamish as the property owners in the city about any kind of impact on their facility. So although I can't speak for what they may or may not have done when they built their box, I can tell you that there's no way they're going to let us build anything within that zone of influence. So what that effectively means is, when I say drill, is we'll drill below that zone of influence before we hit one pile. Okay? That has the advantage that for structures with foundations on a typical two-story structure, you're talking, 16-inch, 18-inch below grade, is we're well below the zone of influence. But we take it one step further than that, and one of the things that we have in our specifications is we have a monitoring program exactly for those kinds of effects. And what we're looking at essentially is we're looking at two levels of displacement, right? We're looking at, on the one hand, you don't want to have, over the course of the construction, any displacement. On the other hand, you really don't want to have all that displacement occurring in 5 minutes.
Right.
So we look at kind of both. We look at almost an immediate change from our operations, and then we look at kind of a long-term thing. So both of those, I think, are ways of looking out for that.
Okay. And then last question is, now we talked a little bit about the nights, the construction. What about after they're done and the companies that are there? I'm not going to mention the name of the company that was here prior, but they used to come and work on their equipment 3 or 4 in the morning. You guys, the guy's working on the tires. He's greasing up the backhoes and whatever he's doing. He's working on all the heavy equipment at 3 in the morning. And there's been a few times I went out, and I know there's other people that I talked to there that went out and had discussions with him, because we had trouble getting people out here from BART to get these guys out of here, and they weren't supposed to be here at the time. So, and if you're a construction company, you want to get that stuff done off hours, right?
Yep. And the answer to that is, the first half is going back to the specs again, but the second half of a spec is only as good as the enforcement of it, as you know. So we can write anything we want in the specifications. I'm probably not supposed to do this, but I'm going to out our CM team hiding behind us here. And so we have one of the best CM teams in the business out here, and they are going to make sure that we enforce that specification. So I think on both sides, we've got you covered.
I'd like to also address that, though. If folks are trying to, if folks want to access our property and work within what we call a safety envelope, which is 15 feet on each side of the rails, they actually require our authorization to do so. So you wouldn't have people out there just sort of on or near the track, just working on their equipment and things like that. So it's a little bit of a different situation because of the way rail rights of way like ours operate.
Hello, my name is Vic. I live over here in Huntington. What's going to happen when you're going to put in a claim when your walls start cracking and your foundation starts cracking and stuff like that? What are you going to do about that?
When myself as the railroad puts in that claim, or when you, the property owner?
I'm talking about the construction company. Who's going to pay your damages and stuff like that when they start doing the construction work, like the pounding and the drilling and all that other good stuff?
But your question is as it affects individual?
Yeah, individually homes I'm talking about.
Okay, so that's a good question, and the answer is we're not going to let that happen. And the way we do
it happened the last time, and I got screwed.
Okay, well, I can't speak to that, but
yeah.
What I will say, though, is if you do have some significant issues, any concerns, including what you feel is maybe damage to your property, I encourage you to contact.
Especially in the inside,
But contact us, and then.
Well, who do I contact?
Oh.
Yeah, I don't
the
see
number on the last slide. It's our Office of Public Affairs at Caltrain. We can be reached at area code 650-508-7726, or by email at sbgradesep@caltrain.com. We're also located right in San Carlos, 1250 San Carlos Avenue, 94007.
All right. Thank you.
That should be a 7, not a 4. Forgive me. So please contact us if you have any concerns.
Hello, Walter Skinner, and I live on Huntington, and apparently I'm going to be right across the street from the temporary Caltrain station, which is news to me because last time during the BART Caltrain shoe fly, the temporary station was under 380. So I'll get to that question in a minute. I've got 2 complaints and 4 questions. First, this meeting is being scheduled on a state holiday. Are you guys aware that today is Cesar Chavez Day? I really don't think you should be scheduling a meeting like this on a state holiday. It might have affected the attendance. I know there's a lot of people who've talked to me with great concerns about this project who live in San Bruno who I don't see in the audience. Okay. Number 2, a general complaint. San Bruno has been very heavily impacted by transportation projects. San Bruno was first cut right in half by 380, elevated freeway. It's divided the community. I went to numerous BART planning meetings. I think those were very, very successful because we got BART into the airport and we got BART undergrounded. But it seems like that's going to be all for naught if we get a very high raised wall right down the middle of San Bruno. We'll be facing the same thing over again. We already host San Francisco's jail, San Francisco's airport. We've already got an east-west berm right down the middle of town, and this is going to be a north-south Berlin Wall right down the middle of town. And I have been going to these meetings, all the way through. Question. So why is the temporary station on the south end of town, which is a more quiet community, rather than up towards 380 where it was last time, where there's a lot of parking right underneath 380? Aren't the tracks going to be down by that point? So couldn't you have the temporary station there right about under 380 where it was last time during the BART shoe fly?
So the answer on the 380 question is
why is the temporary station down in a residential community rather than up? It's to the north of your last.
Right here.
Which is, that's also the 5th edition. That's a residential community as well, but that's where it was last time.
Correct.
The last time during the BART construction, that's where the temporary station was.
Correct. And unfortunately, in this particular condition, because of the fact that we're still coming down when we hit 380, and because we have to relocate track north of 380, unfortunately, my car is only so big, but if you can picture out here, we're moving track north of 380.
That's your shoe fly, right?
In addition to the shoe fly being constructed, we're actually moving mainline track. So the mainline track is actually going to get pushed further to the west, and that actually precludes us from building that platform that was there previously. So that's the thought process behind building it there. Why exactly there? It was the closest to the grade step we could get it and stay out of the grade step itself. So the existing station, of course, we're already coming up and over with the shoe fly and the grade step. So the next best thing to keeping it where it was to move it immediately to the south.
Okay, it looks like you're going to be taking out a lot of those trees across the street from our houses. Is that going to be a 2-year station?
Yes, it'll be.
You've got parking lots where those trees are.
Correct.
Which already mitigates noise from BART and Caltrain. So those trees are going to come down. We've got a station for 2 years, correct?
Correct.
And then are we going to get our trees back?
You're going to get more trees than you started with at the end of this project. That's something the city worked with us very strongly on.
Okay.
And they insisted that we did not replace in kind, but we went above and beyond that. And
all right.
I'd be happy to show you where those are going in, but you will end up with more trees than you have now.
Thank you. Why is this project being done now rather than waiting for high-speed rail, which many communities are trying to get underground? Granted, high-speed rail has to be electric. It cannot be at grade. Mm-hmm. So many communities along the peninsula have sued or are suing the high-speed rail project so that it's not elevated, so that it's tunneled or cut and cover, either trenched or cut and cover. So why not wait? San Bruno has already dealt with the grade crossings and the danger of the grade crossings for more than 100 years.
Right.
So why not wait for this high-speed rail project and do all this at the same time, in case high-speed rail is in fact undergrounded through San Bruno?
Okay, that's a really good question because it hits on really the core design challenge that we had on an engineering side. So there's two things with that. First of all, again, this is primarily a safety improvement project. So you say that, that San Bruno has lived without grade crossings. That's a good characterization. It's lived with them, but unfortunately, it's not ideal, as you know. There are traffic implications. There are all kinds of implications, but forefront is, of course, safety implications when you have cars and trains in the same location. But to your question as to why now and not 6 months, a year, what have you, this particular piece of real estate is actually unique in the Caltrain corridor and in fact on the high-speed corridor, in that you're very correct, high-speed is not at the point yet where they can actually definitively say where they're going to go, up, down, what have you, in any one location. This is the single location on the corridor where we can definitively say that high speed will do exactly partially raised tracks and partially lowered streets. Why am I so sure of that? I'm sure of it for two reasons. BART running right here, which precludes me from going all the way underground. Can't do it. 380, which as you pointed out is over here, precludes me from going all the way raised and leaving streets at grade because I'd have to duck down at such an angle that my trains would never make it up the slope. So really, we actually looked at all 6 permutations of tracks go all the way up, roads stay where they are, roads go all the way up, tracks stay where they were. We looked at all 6 and we came to the conclusion there is no other possible way to grade set this area, and hence, if you look at the environmental documents the preliminary environmental documents that High Speed is working on, they in fact show this as the no-build alternative. So they're well cognizant that there really is only one way to do that. So typically as an engineer, you don't want constraints. This is a rare example where a constraint is good because I can definitively say this is how grade SEP is going to have to look, whether it be high speed or whether it be Caltrain or whether it be both. And let me just jump in real quick because you brought up high speed, which is a very good point. And
I've been going to all those meetings too.
Unfortunately, as you know, a lot of information is coming and it seems like it changes on a daily basis, and we were supposed to have someone speak briefly on that, and unfortunately he couldn't attend today, but maybe if I could hit very quickly.
Because it's a state holiday.
Because it's a state holiday, perhaps. One of the issues, well, I'll mention that in a sec. So one of the things that we staged the construction of this is that the construction staging was shoe fly on one side, our tracks on the other, allowing us to grade SEP and then high speed where the shoe fly tracks is, I should mention, is exactly the way you would have to stage it if high speed was here today. So number one, it follows the natural progression of how construction staging would have to occur. The other thing that works out is that 2-year construction lands us in 2012, which lines up exactly with what high speed is telling us right now. They should be on track with their environmental clearance, and they should be right behind us. So the other thing that we've been working with high speed on is the timing. We're well aware the city doesn't want to deal with this twice, and we can understand that.
We already dealt with BART.
Yeah, okay, 3 times then, or 4 times if you count 380, I guess. Does that answer your question? Or?
Last 2 questions are more simple.
Okay.
Caltrain wants to go electric and kind of piggyback on some of the high-speed rail money, and I think that's great. Is this project already allowed for electrification? You just hang the wires above?
Yes, it does. So we will not build the poles as part of this project.
Right.
We will, however, build the foundations that those poles will need, and we will cast them. You won't see them, but they'll be hidden in the MSC structure. And what that means is it's a little bit of extra cost up front if electrification gets delayed, but of course it's a huge cost if we would have to come back with electrification, jackhammer it out, and design something. Right. So we are incorporating that. The second thing we're doing as part of this is, of course, we're going to ground everything on the station as metallic to make sure that when we do electrify.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask you, you said you guys are going to leave something for the future. Why didn't you guys, not you guys, but why didn't they think about this when they were doing BART? They knew you guys were going to come in the first place. I know you talked about it before.
I really can't answer that question. I'm sorry, but. And I should mention on your first point about the state holiday, I do apologize for that, but we will be having another one of these meetings when our main contractor is on board, and at that meeting we'll actually be able to go through the schedule. The reason we can't get into more specifics as to what will happen on what day is we typically leave that up to the contractor to provide us a detailed schedule, and then we work with them to minimize impact. So the second meeting we will absolutely make sure will not occur on a state holiday and or federal or any other holiday.
Lastly, if you do, if high-speed rail does indeed come down the middle of this thing, and you've already planned for possibly widening the berm to run it down the middle, do you have any idea on EIR or noise for those faster trains as they come off that grade in my neighborhood there? I mean, are they going to be louder than Caltrain, softer than Caltrain? Any idea at all?
So I guess the official by-the-book answer is that I don't know.
But you're allowing for it. You're going to put their high-speed rail on your berm.
Yeah, I was going to keep going with that.
It's on the picture.
Right, and I was going to keep going with that. So the official answer is it's on high speed, but we did, of course, look at it, and we used the best examples that we had from looking at some of the Spanish and some of the newer Asian trains, and we did model that just to see. The main thing is, of course, they run faster. There's no question. But
they're not going to be 200 miles an hour in the peninsula.
Again,
unless
I
we
don't
can
know
get it underground.
that, but highly unlikely, but I don't know that for a fact. But what I will say about high-speed trains is they're significantly lighter than our trains, and they have a lower profile than our trains. So when you add that together with the higher speed, it's actually quieter. And then the other thing, of course, is, as you pointed out earlier, is those trains will be electric. And when we switch over to electrification, with or without high speed, you're going to see a dramatic decrease because you're not going to get that screeching, you're not going to get the noise coming out of the station. And so that's another thing that we looked at when we modeled all the way, because we modeled to 2035, and we looked at electrification as yet another way of it. And of course, when you throw electrification into it, your noise and vibration goes way down because now you're running much quieter.
Thank you.
I'm on. Alice Barnes, Fifth Avenue, and I want to thank you very much for all your information. When you were telling that gentleman about where we could put the station, I got to tell you folks, and Doris and I were both on the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, back in 2001 and 2.
And 3.
And we looked at all those alternatives, and we looked where BART is, and we looked where 380 was, and I gotta tell you, in a three-dimensional world, the end of that new station could have fit in a little box that size. You couldn't go that way, you couldn't go that way. You go up, no, you couldn't. That's it. And the problem was BART at 380. And for the gentleman or the person who spoke about claims for damages, now is the time to go through your house and take videos and photographs. And think I'm odd, but the most obnoxious thing on the wall is gonna fall in all probability. He didn't say it, I did. So before they start construction, take your photographs and have a witness with you when you do it so you can have a better claim. We learned that with BART. The gentleman asked about the electrification. I think it's disingenuous of you to not show a rendering with the electrification poles and catenary above it. Now, we all know, those of us who studied it, up here on First Avenue at the north part, that wall is going to be at least 20 feet high above the curb. Now, if you can't think of a two-story building, go out and look at a telephone pole. And that's where the top of it will be. And then you start there and you put the pole that's got to be taller than the 19-foot train you're going to have like 40 feet that you're going to be looking up to. And may I apologize for that, because there's no way out of getting it done. And I'm one of the last persons to like that idea, but we're going to live with it. And you folks are not showing it anywhere. Now, I'm upset, I think, with the project schedule. You talk about the underground utility work being done between May and October. The current Caltrain station is in this section. And in '97, when BART was getting ready to come in, they put in the telephone companies, the telecommunication companies, put in all of this fiber optic under there in nice plastic conduit. But where the building is for BART at the current Caltrain station, they brought it underneath the tracks. And because of the weight of the trains, they put it in a great big metal conduit. I bet you're going to be doing something like that, because the shoe fly is going to be on this area where the fiberglass is.
You want me to answer that
Go
right
ahead.
now? Okay, so to your question about the utilities, so you do see, of course, some utility relocations in advance, and you actually hit on the biggest utility relocation that's going to occur in advance. Obviously, there's going to be some minor adjustments that we need to do as we're doing the construction itself. That's not what we're talking about when we say utility relocation. What we're talking about is primarily what you just mentioned, is ATT has a shared duct bank that runs along there. The good news is part of that has reached its useful life, and they're abandoning part of their line, which is great news for people like me. The second half of it is, what do we do when we run a shoe fly on PVC or HDPE or some kind of plastic that's effectively brittle? Well, the answer is we're not going to run on it. We're going to relocate, or to be more precise, we're going to make the utility companies relocate in advance of us. So on your schedule where you see utility relocations, that's what that refers to. And the utility companies are essentially, again, I'd have to point to boards that don't exist, but essentially, instead of running along this side of the right-of-way, we're actually going to have the utility company move their main fiber line to the opposite side. And they'll do that through a mole bore, which is actually a trenching piece of equipment that allows them to do it with just an entry and an exit hole, if you will. So the short answer to that is we won't be running trains on PVC. Where we do have to cross the tracks, you're absolutely correct. We case it so that that is not a concern.
Okay, and so that means that in this section of the current Caltrain station, where right along First Avenue, between First and the tracks, we now have this PVC with the telecommunications. I'm pointing to the station, and we have a lot of children who come down Sylvan, cross at the station currently, and then proceed on their way to the Bel Air School, which is the best in the school district, wherever the principal is. But when you're doing the utilities, how are you going to let our kids go across it?
Okay, another good question. So essentially the answer to that is, as it stands now, without getting too much into how the utilities run, they come along here, and then out basically where BART is, they actually cut underneath the tracks and go on to what for me is the right side of the tracks at that point. And so
Bel Air think that's the wrong side of the tracks. We're on the right side. Go ahead.
But I meant that literally. But right in the sense that it's out of my way. Let's put it that way, okay? So what that's going to allow to happen in the new configuration is we'll cut over earlier, and then run fiber all along this side and tie into the existing. So in answer to your question, what's going to happen when they're trenching out all this fiber and doing all this stuff? The answer is they're not going to be doing that. They'll abandon that line in place, and they'll just concrete that out. They'll essentially fill it with slurry. So there won't be open cut in that area. What you're going to see is, again, some kind of a mold bore system where they jack and push several hundred feet at a time, and it'll kind of do that all the way until it gets back to where the runs on that side of the track.
Is it okay to compliment you? You know the pedestrian gates on the sidewalks at Angus and San Bruno and the other. Well, when they put the shoe fly over on the First Avenue side, they're going to have to move the gates. It's a costly procedure. And he's just telling me tonight that they're going to move the crossing gates to the east side. So we're going to be protected still. And these folks have really gone out of their way for safety. Notice we haven't had many fatalities in San Bruno lately. Knock on wood. But I'm going to come up with one for you, Raphael.
Okay.
Okay? Our kids, you folks on the camera could probably see it, okay? Our kids come down Sylvan. They go into the Caltrain station currently. There's a pedestrian crossing gate. They cross safely. And then what they do is they walk all the way around the National Guard to the Bel Air School. You with me? Okay. When your construction starts, Raphael says the first thing to go in is way over here, the temporary station. And that's important because there's not going to be any way for anybody to cross the tracks here. And Raphael and I know that from this point, the kids are going to have to walk down the street all the way over here to the station and then cross, which we measured today at 520 feet. That's almost the length of 2 football fields. Okay, and then when they get over on this side, they're going to walk over here, and you recognize Lions Field in the parking lot, and they're going to walk all the way over here to school. That's a heck of a long way for little kids or mothers with strollers. And so we're asking, and you could put more pressure behind our request. The guys are standing there. We absolutely need a crossing guard in this area as soon as this is closed to be sure the kids are not trespassing across the tracks. I don't have any young kids, but some of you may, and I don't want to lose any of them. So we really need a crossing guard to protect our kids during the school.
Can I just add one point to what we said, and that is that when we're talking about walking 500 feet, that's during construction activity only. In the final phase, we'll actually provide a pedestrian-only underpass at that location. So I just want to clarify that in the final alignment, you're going to have a completely grade-separated pedestrian underpass at that location, as well as 2 other locations further north. I just wanted to mention
The man is absolutely right. But for 2 years, our kids are going to be walking all the way over here.
Other side of the temp station, right?
This is the temporary station. That's a ramp. This is the temporary. So that's 520 feet.
You're correct.
So get your kids in shape. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Dan Slavin with Granite Rock Company. A couple of questions. You mentioned earlier that you'll be moving the mainline track north of this grade separation. How far north will the mainline track be moved?
Okay, so the mainline track is being shifted north of 380, and at, of course it varies, but points of reference would be at South Linden, we'll move it approximately 3 inches, so it's literally just a nudge. By the time you get down to Scott, it's actually moving 16 feet. So if you can picture, that's approximately where it ties in with the current alignment. It fair bit at Scott, virtually nothing by the time you get to Linden.
And where will it return to grade from the grade separation?
At 380 approximately.
Okay. During construction, do you see any impacts to rail freight access along the line?
No, we're not going to be precluding UP or any other carrier from doing what they need to do.
Great. Okay.
Especially not on that spur track up by a certain aggregate plant up in
Thanks a lot.
City.
Any other questions? Please come up to the mic.
Hi, I'm Amos Skidmore of Martin Place. A couple of questions. With the 4-track design, I was wondering how northbound passengers are going to board. Like, are they going to cross over tracks? Or is there some sort of way to get in between those 2 sets of tracks?
Now, in the event that the 4-track configuration is constructed, high-speed rail would be in the middle tracks, so they would be expressing through the station. Okay, Caltrain would be running on the outboard tracks, and they would be outboard platforms. So you would have one on the southbound side and one on the northbound side, where Caltrain would stop.
Good, cool. Also, with the Sylvian underpass, would bikes be allowed to ride underneath it? I mean, it's been talked about as a pedestrian underpass, but I'm just wondering whether it would be big enough to accommodate bikes safely.
Yes, it just wouldn't be an auto underpass.
Yeah,
that wouldn't be tall enough, right?
For automobiles?
No, for bikes.
For bikes,
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Well, if there are no additional questions, again, here's our contact information. We thank you very much for coming out tonight. We'll be here till 8:30 if you have other questions. Please do sign in the back if you'd like. Leave your email address, and as we send out notices, one will come in a couple of weeks. We do normally mail those out, but we can also email those to you as well. Thank you again.